Hey guys, Will here. Welcome back to the channel. Now, about a month ago now, I shared the results that I was able to achieve with my 8700K processor after delidding it and overclocking it in my custom water-cooled PC. So, about a week after I did that, Intel came out and announced the 8086K processor, which was their 40th anniversary limited edition chip, which was basically just an 8700K but binned a little bit higher, so theoretically should overclock a little bit more. And I released a video talking about that chip and comparing it to an 8700K in terms of specs, and unfortunately got absolutely torn to shreds in the comments because I wasn't actually comparing the two chips in terms of, you know, their physical performance. It was just specs. So I was doing a lot of thinking about it and thinking, you know, what can I do to sort of try and fix this up to give you guys the information that you want. And I needed to build my wife a new computer for her work. So I thought, you know what? I've got a really bright idea here. I'll give her my Delidded 8700K for her build, and I'll pick myself up an 8086K, delid it, and do some testing so we can directly compare the two chips. So this video, we're going to be comparing the two chips to each other, the 8700K, which I delidded previously, and the 8086K. So I'm not going to show you the delidding in this video because I've done that before. The 8086K delidding is exactly the same as the 8700K. So if you haven't seen that video already, do check it out. So in my hands here are the two stock IHSs from the two chips. So we've got the 8086K and the 8700K. You can see they're absolutely identical to each other, no differences at all. And indeed, the two chips are physically identical to each other. But in this video, we're going to be overclocking the 8086K, comparing it directly to the results that we got with my 8700K to see if it was worth the purchase or not. Okay, so before we actually get stuck into the results from the two chips, I wanted to talk a little bit about stability and exactly how I'm going to define that in this video, because I think that's important. A lot of people, particularly on Reddit, I've noticed, post results with these chips claiming, you know, crazy high clock speeds with crazy low voltage. They say it's stable, and it turns out they've only actually run a single loop of something like Cinebench or something like that they're calling it stable. And unfortunately, there isn't really a standardized approach to what defines a stable chip or an unstable chip. Some people say that stable is, you know, being able to do all the things that you would normally do without getting blue screens or crashes. Other people would say that stable is when you place the chip under a completely unrealistic heavy AVX load, you know, with one of these stress test programs like Prime 95 or Intel Burn Test, and you know, make sure that that's stable for 24 hours. So that's placing, you know, extremely unrealistic loads on those chips to test stability. And unfortunately, because there isn't a standardized approach to this, it's very difficult to say, you know, my chip was stable at this voltage, this chip wasn't, and so forth, which is the reason, one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, because I want to compare the two chips using exactly the same methodology under exactly the same testing circumstances. So for the purpose of this video, the way I'm going to be testing it is using a Intel Burn Test at 4GB setting, so the very high setting, and doing 10 loops. So if it's able to pass through 10 loops of that, then I'm defining the chip as stable. Now, there are scenarios sometimes where Intel Burn Test will pass and Realbench or a program like that might fail, or Prime 95 might fail, but I'm going to use the exact same testing method that I used for the 8700K so that we're comparing apples with apples. But I just thought it was important to define for you guys exactly what I'm considering stable when I say the word stable in this video. So with that aside, we'll stick these two boxes on the shelf behind me for the two processors in front of my heatsink from my graphics card, and we'll get stuck into a bit of a recap of the results from the 8700K. So I do encourage you to watch my post delidding comparison video, which I will link above my head for you right now, where I covered all the results pre and post delidding on the 8700K. Really important to watch that video to get an understanding of exactly what delidding actually achieves for these chips. Obviously, I've already delidded the 8086K, and if you're interested in knowing how to do that as well, I do have a video on delidding the 8700K and 8086K as well. So check that out as well, and I'll link that above my head for you right now as well. But so the results from the 8700K, the delidding process itself did really well. It improved my temperatures and my overclockability quite a lot. It moved my my limitations from a thermal limitation, which it was with the stock processor, to a voltage limitation. But that said, I still wasn't super happy with the overclocks I got compared to what I know a lot of other people were getting on the internet. So looking at the results here for you now, 4.8 gigahertz required 1.28 volts on the V-core. 4.9 gigahertz required 1.31 volts on the V-core, 5 gigahertz required 1.36 volts, and 5.1 gigahertz required 1.425 volts on the V-core, which was pushing the upper limit of what I was comfortable running as a daily use chip. And I wasn't actually able to get the chip any higher than that without pushing into dangerous territory around the sort of 1.5 volt mark, which I'm just not willing to do. So it's important to note as well that these are the synced core speeds as well. So all 6 cores running at those frequencies. So what we were able to deduce from that was that basically my 8700K wasn't a terrible performer, but it also wasn't a fantastic performer. It was probably a little bit below average in terms of performance. And when you look at the chips that are available on Silicon Lottery, that kind of validates that as well. A lot of people were able to get up to that 5.2 gigahertz mark stable at the same voltages that I was requiring for 5 to 5.1 gigahertz. So wasn't a fantastic chip, but wasn't an absolutely terrible chip either. So how does that compare to my 8086K chip that I have in the PC now? So I'm really stoked with the results. It's still not, unfortunately, a fantastic chip that I got. There are some people that are getting better results than me, but it's a much better result than I got with my 8700K. So I'm not going to actually cover the whole overclocking process in this video because it is quite tedious. There's a lot of tweaking and setting, and I've spent a good 24 hours now stability testing this chip to make sure that the results that I share in this video are completely accurate. And I am going to do a separate video, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, where I really go through all the details of overclocking an 8th generation Intel chip and, you know, showing you what all the settings inside the BIOS mean, how they influence the overclock, and exactly how you can fine-tune your chip to get the best possible results. But this video, we're just going to cover the results that I actually did get with the chip. So 4.8 gigahertz, which we previously needed a 1.28 volt V-core on the 8700K, now able to achieve that same clock speed with the 8086K at just 1.16 volts. So that's a delta of 0.12 volts there. 4.9 gigahertz, I'm able to run at 1.22 volts V-core. So starting to push towards the higher frequencies now. 5 gigahertz only needs 1.26 volts on the V-core with this chip. And this is where it started to get a little bit disappointing with this chip, because when I reached that 5 gigahertz mark, I really thought, wow, this is awesome. I've still got, you know, 0.1 of a volt headroom here, and I'm already at that 5 gigahertz mark, thinking that I might even get up towards the 5.3 or 5.4 gigahertz mark on this chip within the safe voltages that I can run. Now, obviously, being delidded with this chip, I'm able to run up towards that sort of 1.425 volt mark before my temperatures start to push anywhere near the 80-degree mark. So I'm happy to run at that sort of 1.4 to 1.425 voltage mark on this chip, but unfortunately, the chip had other ideas. It didn't really want to push too much further. So I was able to get to 5.1 gigahertz at 1.34 volts V-core, which I was a little bit disappointed with because it was such a big jump from the 5 gigahertz mark. So obviously that 5 gigahertz mark is the sweet spot for this chip. That said, though, I was still able to reach the 5.1 gigahertz mark comfortably at 1.34 to 1.35 volts on the V-core. Now pushing up towards the 5.2 gigahertz mark, which I wasn't even able to achieve on my 8700K without pushing the voltages way too high. 5.2 gigahertz with the 8086K is completely stable at 1.41 volts V-core, which, you know, it's still within the comfortable limits of this chip, remembering that I am delidded as well. So my temperatures still don't get above that sort of 80 to 85 degree mark there. So I probably could push a little bit harder, but I don't really see the point in doing that. Now, with AVX offset enabled, I am able to boot up and have a stable system at 5.3 gigahertz at the same V-core as 5.2 gigahertz, but with an AVX offset of 1. So under AVX loads, the frequency obviously drops back down to that 5.2 gigahertz mark. But anything beyond that, I'm not able to get stability. So I wasn't able to get AVX stability at 5.3 gigahertz at all with my 86K processor, up to the sort of 1.45 volt mark on the V-core that I was comfortable testing at. Didn't want to push any harder than that because I started to see temperatures creeping up towards that 90-degree mark, and I'm not comfortable doing that for daily usage. So where have we actually ended up in terms of our day-to-day usage for the two chips? So the 8086K processor, I'm running at 5.1 gigahertz as my daily at 1.33 to 1.35 volts, depending on the load line calibration, whereas my 8700K 4.9 gigahertz at that same voltage level. So where does that leave us in the greater scheme of things? So there are a lot of people that are claiming up to 5.4 gigahertz stable on these chips, but again, like we said at the start of the video, stable is a relative term, and the people that are saying they're reaching those clock speeds really aren't publishing exactly what they're doing to test stability. A lot of them are just saying I was able to run a Cinebench loop or something like that, whereas I know at these voltages that I've published in this video, my system is absolutely rock stable. It won't fall over. I've verified that with a real bench loop overnight as well, so I'm absolutely confident that there's going to be no problems there at all. So hopefully that's given you an idea of roughly what you can expect between the two different chips. Now, that said, obviously the silicon lottery does come into play a lot here as well. So some people will find that they got an 8700K processor which overclocks better than my 8086K processor. Some people will find, you know, the other way around, that the 8086K processor performs way better than the 8700K. What's important to note here is that essentially they are exactly the same chip as each other, just binned differently. So if you got a really bad 8700K processor, then there's a very, very good chance that you're going to get a much better result with an 8086K processor than you were able to achieve with the 8700K. If you've already got a really good 8700K processor, then there's very little point in upgrading to an 86, because it's basically exactly the same thing. You're not likely to get a better result. And what we're finding with the results of these chips now is that Intel have obviously reserved the good 8700K processors as 8086K chips moving forward. So a good 8700K processor 3 months ago is probably about the same as an 8086K processor is now. Whereas now, if you buy an 8700K processor, you can pretty much be guaranteed that it's going to be a lower bin chip than the 8086K, because all the good ones have been reserved by Intel. So look, in terms of how I feel about the chip, it's great that Intel have actually given us the option to buy a highly binned chip with a guaranteed performance that is higher than what you would get with an 8700K out of the box as it stands right now. What sucks is that, you know, they're charging more money for what is essentially the same chip. So all of the fanciness aside of the special anniversary logo that you get in CPU-Z and the special packaging, which is all very nice, you're spending, you know, 100, 150 bucks more for what is effectively the same chips. So look, ultimately it comes down to your own personal preference. I really have a problem with people that are shit-canning the 8086K processor, saying that it's a complete rip-off, because in my usage case scenario here, I was able to get a better result. And look, to be honest with you, I was so disappointed with the 8700K processor that I had, because I really wanted to reach that 5 gigahertz mark. And, you know, with the amount of money and time that I invested in building this system, it was disappointing to have people that were running air coolers with better clock speeds on the 8700K than I was able to achieve with all of the effort that I put into this. So now having a chip that I can confidently say performs on the upper end of what's possible with this chipset and everything makes me happy. So in my usage case, I'm very, very satisfied with the chip, and I feel that it was worth the extra money for me. But, you know, a lot of people are going to disagree with me here, and I accept that. It just comes down to what's important to you. At the end of the day, the real world performance difference between the two chips is very, very minimal, and there's already a couple of videos around on YouTube which demonstrates that. So look, it really is a chip designed for the enthusiast. It's for people that want to see the highest numbers, that take pride in that want to sort of race against other people and push the overclocking to the absolute maximum that's possible and not be restricted by a low bin chip. So if that's you, like me, then yeah, the 8086K processor is probably worth it. If you just want to have a good performing chip for gaming and you don't really care about the numbers, then an 8700K is probably going to be a better choice. You're not going to see a huge amount of difference between the two chips in the real world, but it just comes down to what's important to you. So look, I hope you guys have found this video interesting and useful. If you have, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss the next video. As I mentioned, I am going to be doing some really detailed videos on overclocking the Z370 chipset with these 8th generation chips in them. So hopefully a lot of you guys will find that really useful. I find there's a lot of guides to overclocking on YouTube, but most of them are just sort of saying, here's my settings, use these. Whereas what I really want to try and achieve is really explaining exactly what all the settings mean, how they influence it, so you can really fine-tune your own chip. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found the video interesting and useful, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.